sustained winds 35.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us here at the Weather Channel for Storm Watch, sponsored by Walls. We have the strongest hurricane of the Atlantic season rotating in the Western Caribbean at this hour. And for a full update, here's John Hope, hurricane expert here at the Weather Channel.
Yes, indeed, Marshall. That is the strongest hurricane of this season and one of the most powerful ones we've ever seen in the Caribbean, certainly this time of year. It's not quite as strong as Gilbert was back in 1988 and also Allen back in 1980, but a very powerful storm. Several have asked me if that was the strongest one we ever had this late in the year. I don't think it is quite. We had one hurricane in 1932, even early November, that hit up here on the south coast of Cuba. I believe that hurricane was a little bit stronger than this one is, but this is powerful enough. It's really an awesome hurricane. Centered at 16.7, 89.2, that's about 201 miles. Pretty precise measurement there, southwest of Grand Cayman Island. The winds are 155 miles an hour, and it's moving toward the west about 8. Now, what we believe is going to happen here, it's going to slow even more and not move very much. Basically, we still expect to find this hurricane somewhere in the Western Caribbean Sea 2 or 3 days down the road. In the meantime, we have hurricane warnings out from the border here of Nicaragua and Honduras over to Limon in Honduras. They may be extended west a little bit farther. Swan Island is kind of under the gun. They're about as close as anybody. But I would like to comment that so far people have been very fortunate to have not been directly impacted by this hurricane. Even down here in Honduras, it's far enough away so they're barely getting tropical storm force winds. They have not had tropical storm force winds in the Cayman Islands or in Jamaica, and of course those watches and warnings for Jamaica have now been discontinued. But we want to remind you what this means. A hurricane watch, hurricane conditions are possible within the next 36 hours. A hurricane warning, we expect to see hurricane conditions within the next 24 hours or less. So what it is here is a very slow movement. It's very well defined. We can't see that it's getting any less organized than it was a short time ago. We haven't had a reconnaissance aircraft in there recently to check the pressure force for sure, but there is one on the way down there now, and this aircraft will be in the area at about a little after noon Eastern Standard Time. And here we can show you what this looked like as the sun rose this morning. You can see just an awesome looking hurricane. Still have that stadium effect on the eye, where we only see that kind of structure in the very strongest of hurricanes. And we can zoom out on that a little bit and show you what the overall picture looks like. This is Grand Cayman Island up here. The strongest winds reported Grand Cayman overnight were about 30 miles an hour. And again, as far as I can see, they're barely getting tropical storm force winds here in Honduras. But we certainly would urge people in the country of Belize and also in the Yucatan Peninsula to watch very carefully here. The hurricane force winds extending out about 70 miles and the tropical storm force winds about 140 miles as this meanders slowly toward the west. Now, a lot of people want to know if this is going to affect the United States. Well, I wish we could tell you. Right now, we know it's going to stay down. We feel sure it will stay down in the Caribbean for some time to come. And whether or not it might eventually affect the United States is just simply too early to tell. And if that were to happen, it would be late in the week at the very earliest before that would be likely to happen. Elsewhere, we have our storm out here in the Pacific. That was Lester. It's now dissipated entirely. And out in the West Pacific, we have our typhoon. That typhoon now is moving more toward the northeast than it is anywhere else, and it is expected to weaken. The top winds now, though, about 80 miles an hour. That's the tropics. Now let's go back quickly to Marshall.
Thanks, John. We'll look at the radar first, and as we do so, you're going to see some rain out there in the Four Corners region associated with a very slow-moving storm system that will slowly begin to head to the east as the evening goes on today. Could bring some rain out into Iowa. Tomorrow morning, expect some rain perhaps in Des Moines and in Omaha, and we should see some pretty heavy snow above 10,000 feet out in the San Juans of Colorado.
Hurricane Mitch is threatening the Cayman Islands. Will it threaten the U.S. as well? The latest on this very powerful storm, plus your weather just ahead on Weather Center.
This program was sponsored by Walls, leading the way outdoors.
If you you spend any time in the cold, you should know Walls has clothes to keep you warm. We've been keeping active folks comfortable for over 50 years with clothes for winter's worst. Because we know the weather won't give you a break unless you take one. Walls, leading the way outdoors.
Walls quality outerwear is available at a retailer near you.
What sets some people apart? Gives them the confidence to succeed on their own terms. It's no secret, it's the Wall Street Journal. Now you can have that confidence delivered for 13 weeks at just $36.75, just 57 cents a day. That's a 25% savings off our regular rate, which makes now a great time to try this limited time offer. Call now, 800-626-8500. That's 800-626.
Back with you at this time. Let's take a look at what is a Category 5 hurricane. Well, what it is exactly is with winds, sustained winds above 155 miles per hour. The barometric pressure has been falling today. It is down to an estimated 906 millibars. That's pretty low. That means it was falling overnight last night and for much of this morning. We're looking at the outer bands. They are still sprawling across the Cayman Islands here, and we may see a few more inches of rainfall, and that could be a problem for the area. That may mean some localized flooding here. Jamaica, we're faring up a little bit better. I'm going to put this into motion as I continue to get you orientated. We're looking at Cuba, just seeing some of the extreme outward bands coming in with maybe a sprinkle or two, and rain with cloudiness at times may be a little bit more impressive, but for the most part we're faring up much better in Cuba here today. The storm has been on a westward track, and so certainly we're at concern, and awareness should be heightened all along Honduras. Nicaragua, a little further to the south here. We're not too threatened by Mitch, with it being so far to the north of Nicaragua, but certainly things in Belize are not at what we would like for them to be at this hour. Certainly preparation is on the minds of all out here in the Caribbean. Let me share with you, it's a very strong hurricane, and the hurricane winds are extending away from the center 45 miles outward. Tropical storm winds extending out 175 miles, and so already we are looking for some of the wind, tropical storm strength winds, to be grazing across the coastal shores of Honduras at this time. Warnings were placed in effect across the extreme eastern areas of Honduras. It is likely that we will see additional warnings. Perhaps the extreme eastern areas will take up a warning before the day is out, and even perhaps Belize. We may be seeing warnings placed out here. As far as the Cayman Islands go, we are currently under a hurricane watch, but we are also under a tropical storm warning at this time. Give you the latest statistics on Hurricane Mitch. Again, the sustained winds at 170 miles per hour, the millibar pressure down to 906. This is a Category 5, and of course any landfall could mean catastrophic conditions as a result of Hurricane Mitch coming to landfall. Let's hope this isn't the case, but we'll continue to update you on this situation in the Caribbean. Dan?
Thanks, Mark.
On storm watch, we have still a kind of unsettled pattern in the west, some rain showers, thunderstorms, and even some mountain snows. We're going to take a look at that, but the big story today is in the tropics. Intense Hurricane Mitch, and with the tropical update, here's Dr. Steve Lyons.
Well, thank you, Mike, and welcome to the Tropical Update. We have some interesting weather for you tonight here on the Weather Channel. Tropical speaking, we have Hurricane Mitch out here in the Caribbean, and boy is it a strong one. One of the strongest hurricanes on record, probably in the top 5, maybe the 4th strongest, and it is definitely the strongest in October. As a matter of fact, there have been only 2 Category 5 hurricanes in the month of October, and one of them was Hurricane Hattie that ran over Belize in 1961. Some of you may remember that. Let's get to the latest statistics on it. As of 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, location was about 200 miles south-southwest of the Grand Cayman Islands.
And look at those winds, 180 miles per hour. This is a devastating hurricane if it were to hit land right now. It's moving to the west-northwest at 8 miles per hour. And the good news is that even though we've got these hurricane warnings up along the coast of Honduras and Nicaragua, and we have some watches up over the Cayman Islands, the circulation center is relatively small. And that's good news because all of the strong winds are out over the water, and we don't see any real strong winds along the coastal zone. And we hope that this thing spins down a little bit before it gets too close to land to affect it that much. Now, as we go on and look a little bit farther into what's going on, we see some rather interesting things in the tropical circulation here. Here's the visible view here. You can see the circulation is moving off to the west-northwest rather slowly. And it looks like it's going to start to slow down up in here and make a little slower track, even though it's moving now at a fairly persistent pace. We think it's going to slow down here and take a little more northward track and jog up into here, still remaining away from land. And we can see as we look here, sun is starting to set, and you can see half the shadow of the eye is covered in shadows now. So there's very, very cold cloud tops, and we can see that on the infrared satellite imagery here. Look at the symmetry to this hurricane. This is a good indication of how strong they are when the symmetry is so well organized and the eye is so well defined. Now, the thing right now that people have to worry about immediately is the surf that it's generating along the Yucatan Peninsula down to Belize and all along the coast here. The good news is that the circulation is not that large, but still the surf is on the order of 30 to 35 feet near the eye wall and out in front of it, and that surf is going to come along the coast no matter what happens. So be careful with a high surf all along the Central American coast and all up into the Caymans as well. And that will produce some flooding along the lower lying coastal zones from the breaking waves that could be as high as 30 to 35 feet from this hurricane. Very, very devastating system. You can see the plume coming off to the north here. And when we look at the wind radii, you can see tropical storm force radii in yellow, although we have not seen too many winds approaching tropical storm force over the coastline here. They may be gusting to that in shower activity, and I have seen a couple of winds now recently of about 30 miles per hour along the coast. The real strong core is rather small, which is great news because we don't want it anywhere near the coast. This is a potentially deadly hurricane. And as we go out into the Atlantic and look at the overall view, we see westerlies up here, and so the future track of this is rather indecisive. It's going to move rather slowly up into this area, and then we expect slow decrease in intensity, which is good news, but it's going to stay rather strong here for another 48 hours or so, and that's going to be rather dangerous. Elsewhere in the tropics, the westerlies have encroached across the tropical Atlantic, and we really don't have anything out here in tropical development-wise or off the African coast either. All upper-level westerly winds. Our tropical depression lesser is now, that was the last and final advisory there, and you can see in the Pacific Basin, that's really all we have to talk about there. A few cloud clusters left. And out in the western Pacific, we have seen that Babs is continuing off to the northeast and become just a rain event. And we don't expect much out of that. It's still got some pretty brisk winds, but not enough to do all that much. We expect primarily just rainfall over Taiwan.
A little bit of a cool air.
to Storm Watch and the Tropical Update. We have an extraordinarily strong hurricane in the Western Caribbean. In fact, it's a Category 5, and Dr. Steve Lyons is going to talk about that. And then we will return to the U.S. current map and focus on what's going on stateside. But right now, here's Dr. Lyons.
Well, thank you, Bob. And we do have a very powerful Category 5 hurricane, Hurricane Mitch, out here in the northwestern Caribbean Sea, moving to the west-northwest slowly. Let's zoom in on that and see what it looks like. Look at the symmetry to this circulation. Very intense, powerful, dangerous hurricane. And right now, the wind core is relatively small, and we have not seen strong winds anywhere along the coastline. We've seen some very heavy surf pounding the coast, and that will continue. And we've seen some rain bands over the Cayman Islands. We've seen some rain bands over the Guatemala coast and heading toward Belize as well. But so far, the winds have stayed over the ocean with very, very high waves that are going to continue to impact the coast. As of 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, here's the latest on Mitch, about 215 miles southwest of Grand Cayman Island. Winds 180 miles per hour. Extremely dangerous hurricane, moving west-northwest at 8. You can see that Category 5 hurricane, if it were to landfall, is catastrophic. That's above 155, and we're up to 180 on this thing, so very dangerous circulation. Currently, we have hurricane warnings up along the Honduras coast, hurricane watches along the Belize coast. These may change to hurricane warnings later this evening, early tomorrow. We also have hurricane watches up for the Cayman Islands. But as I mentioned before, so far, no strong winds yet. But that does not mean that they're occurring now. Within 24 or within 36 is what those watch and warnings indicate. Also, tropical storm warnings up for the Cayman Islands, and so far we have not seen those other than in gusts. Keep in mind, this is one of the strongest Atlantic Basin hurricanes ever. Ranks number 4 here as of 1998. Earlier today, 905 millibars. The record, of course, Gilbert with 888 in 1988. And you can see here now the track forecast. What are we going to see? We have upper level westerly winds, so if in fact this does get into the Gulf of Mexico, we definitely expect it to weaken. Having a hurricane this strong is very, very difficult to maintain, and so we're hoping that it weakens rather dramatically before it gets too close to the coastline. Right now, the major impact is going to be high surf, and that's going to raise the water level along the coast anywhere from 3 to 5 feet, whether the hurricane reaches the coast or not. This is not associated with storm surge, but what we call wave setup. So that's a major danger. Also, flooding along the coastline is a big potential. The rest of the Atlantic Basin is really uneventful. We have upper-level westerlies there in the central and eastern Atlantic Basin. And in the eastern Pacific Basin, we don't see anything either. The remnants of our tropical depression Lester are there. Let's get back to U.S. weather now with Bob.
Thanks a lot, Steve. I appreciate it. And we're taking a look at some rainfall about a slow-moving low, which is expected to eject out into the plains tomorrow once this low has a chance to move it out. But fog a problem across the upper Great Lakes. You got to be careful for that morning commute. We'll have your local forecast followed by Weather Center coming up next.
Snow and rain persist in parts of the plains and the west, plus the latest from the Caribbean, where Mitch threatens islanders with dangerous Category 5 strength.
Nasty storm. Wet road. Looks pretty bad, huh? No problem. That's the beauty of Subaru all-wheel drive, the ultimate safety feature. Thanks, kid. See, it automatically transfers power from the wheels that slip to the wheels that grip. And only Subaru puts it on every car they make. And that's no accident. Subaru, the beauty of all-wheel drive.
Test drive the beauty of all-wheel drive at a Subaru dealer near you.
News about the great taste of Colombo is traveling fast. All across America, people are singing its praises. And one by one, they're switching. Colombo. Take us for a taste drive.
Joining us on the Weather Channel, 10 minutes before the hour. You've tuned in just in time for Storm Watch. Of course, our top story is Hurricane Mitch. This edition of Storm Watch is sponsored by Touchstone Energy. Let's give you the very latest on Mitch as we begin our tropical update. Mitch is centered at 17.4 degrees north, 84.8 degrees west, and that puts it 250 miles southwest of the Cayman Islands, or 150 miles east of the coast of Honduras. Winds of 180 miles an hour associated with Mitch. It's moving west at 8 miles an hour. Here you see our hurricane symbol in the Western Caribbean. The pressure has increased over the last 12 hours or so, now up to 917 millibars. But of course, yesterday afternoon, the pressure bottomed out at 905 millibars, making Mitch the fourth strongest hurricane ever in the Atlantic Basin. And actually, with it dropping down to 905 millibars, it's the strongest hurricane ever in the month of October. So definitely a very, very intense Hurricane Mitch is, as we continue to watch this system churn. Now, winds of 180 miles an hour. This time yesterday morning, winds were sustained at 155 miles an hour, and that put it at the threshold of a Category 5. So with winds up to 180 miles an hour, you know it's well a Category 5, and that means it has the potential to produce catastrophic damage if it makes landfall. Where is the system going? What landmass is in its path? Well, we've been watching the Yucatan Peninsula sticking out here. Of course, this being the Caribbean islands, Cuba, the Caribbean Sea actually, Cuba, Jamaica here, the Cayman Islands. We have Honduras here, Belize, and Guatemala. Hurricane warnings have been issued by the government of Mexico here for the Yucatan Peninsula. Also, the government of Guatemala has issued a hurricane warning, and hurricane warnings extend along the coast of Honduras as well. Hurricane watches for the coast of Belize, but these could be upgraded to hurricane warnings as Mitch, again, is moving pretty much due west at 8 miles an hour. And as it continues on this path with hurricane watches and warnings, it means this system has the potential now to produce hurricane conditions within the next 24 to 36 hours. That's what a hurricane watch and a hurricane warning mean. Here's a look at our latest satellite picture, which shows a very well-defined hurricane here, a remarkably defined eye in the center of the dense overcast clouds here. You can see the darker reds indicating very cold cloud tops and a very strong pressure gradient between the eye and the eye wall here, and that's why the pressures have been so low with this particular hurricane. You can see it's winding up. Hurricane force winds extend out about 70 miles or so from the center, and tropical storm force winds extend out about 145 miles or so. So we're already seeing or feeling some tropical storm force winds along the coast of Honduras here. Also swells and seas really piling up. We've had reports of flooding in this part. So definitely some big problems with Hurricane Mitch here, churning the waters in the Western Caribbean. Here's a look at the wind profile, and you can see how the winds are extending out, the tropical storm force winds along the coast of Honduras. The broader perspective shows Hurricane Mitch in the Western Caribbean, the fourth strongest ever in the history of the Atlantic Basin. Where is it going from this point? Well, we are practically certain that it will continue on its course to the west at 8 miles an hour over the next 24 hours. Beyond that, it's still fairly uncertain. Different computer models take it across the Yucatan Peninsula and perhaps back into the southern Gulf of Mexico or the Bay of Campeche. So we'll definitely watch Hurricane Mitch for you and give you more updates.
Every day is new. We tell you about the weather right now. How will it affect where you're headed? What about your plans? People count on us to get them through the day. I love that.
This program was sponsored by Touchstone Energy. We are America's electric cooperatives.
Partnership means growth. That's the way it's been for America's electric co-ops and America's businesses and communities. We've always kept affordable power flowing steadily and reliably. Now, we're joining other local co-ops to form a nationwide alliance, Touchstone Energy, to ensure state-of-the-art technology and personalized service. It's the power of human connections. We are America's electric cooperatives.
It's a
place of quiet dignity, where tradition is respected and tastefully observed. And now, during Buick's fall collection,